Ethan stumbled upon a secret so vile it shattered everything he believed in. That night, as the storm raged outside, he vowed to dismantle the lives of those who betrayed him, but not before they saw it coming. My name is Ethan, and until a month ago, I thought my life was perfect. My wife, Vanessa, and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't just partners in marriage but in life. I trusted her with everything. I run a moderately successful tech consultancy, and Vanessa helped me manage the social side of the business. If I was the numbers guy, she was the charmer who made everyone feel welcome. But about 6 months ago, things started to feel off. Vanessa began acting differently. She'd always been outgoing, but now her charm seemed exaggerated, like she was performing. She started staying out late, claiming it was for client meetings or events. When I asked why I wasn't invited, she'd brush me off with a smile. Not everything is about business, Ethan. Let me have my space. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her at first, but the signs were there. The long silences when I walked into the room while she was on her phone, the whispered conversations, the sudden obsession with looking perfect every time she left the house. Then there was Tyler. Tyler had been my best friend for over a decade, my business partner during the early days, and practically family. He and Vanessa always got along, but lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that they got along a little too well. He'd linger when he came over, his laughs with Vanessa a bit too loud, their conversations peppered with inside jokes I didn't understand. The breaking point came when Vanessa started texting during our weekly date nights. She'd tilt her phone away from me, her fingers moving quickly over the screen, a coy smile on her lips. I wasn't paranoid, but something didn't sit right. I decided to follow my gut. That's how I ended up installing a small camera in my home office, the one place Vanessa rarely went. Or so I thought. The footage I found shattered me. When I finally checked the recording a week later, I discovered Vanessa wasn't just coming into my office to grab papers or borrow a charger. She and Tyler were meeting there when I wasn't home. Watching them together on that grainy footage, my wife and my best friend, was like taking a punch to the stomach. I didn't confront her right away. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do. But one thing became painfully clear. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them get away with this. The footage replayed in my mind like a nightmare on loop. Vanessa leaning into Tyler, her lips brushing against his ear, and the way he grabbed her like she belonged to him. My first instinct was to storm into our bedroom, drag Vanessa out of bed, and demand answers. But something held me back. Confronting her right away felt unsatisfying. They were both too comfortable, too sure of themselves. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before I made my move. Over the next week, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I kissed Vanessa good morning, laughed at her half-hearted jokes, and even indulged her elaborate stories about business meetings. Meanwhile, I began digging deeper. The first thing I did was install tracking software on her phone. It was surprisingly easy. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. Within minutes, I had access to her texts, call logs, and even her location history. What I found made my blood boil. Vanessa and Tyler weren't just meeting in our house. They were renting hotel rooms in the city. The texts between them were graphic, littered with pet names and explicit details about their rendezvous. Reading those messages felt like being stabbed repeatedly, but I forced myself to keep scrolling. Then I noticed something odd. Vanessa was also texting Tyler about money. At first, I thought it was about paying for their hotel trysts, but it quickly became clear this was something bigger. She mentioned invoices, accounts, and something about the transfer being complete. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was financial. I checked my business accounts the next day and discovered discrepancies I couldn't explain. Money had been funneled out in small amounts, disguised as legitimate expenses. Vanessa, with her charm and my blind trust, had been siphoning funds with Tyler's help. That was when I knew this wasn't going to end with a simple confrontation. They thought they were clever, but they underestimated me. They thought I'd be too blind, too trusting to notice. They were wrong. By this point, my emotions had shifted. The initial shock and heartbreak were gone, replaced by a simmering rage. But anger wasn't enough. If I wanted revenge, it had to be smart, calculated, and devastating. I started by copying every piece of evidence I could find. Vanessa's texts, the bank transfers, and the footage from the hidden camera. I backed it all up to multiple secure drives. This wasn't just about exposing their infidelity. I needed a complete case. The next step was subtle sabotage. I started leaving small hints, just enough to make them uneasy. A casual comment to Vanessa about weird charges on the business account. A joke to Tyler about how I'd been digging into old paperwork. Their reactions were deliciously predictable: nervous glances, hurried excuses, and forced laughter. They had no idea I was onto them. Then I made my boldest move yet. I told Vanessa I'd be out of town for a weekend business trip. "It's just a quick conference," I said, casually packing a bag while she pretended to be interested. "You'll have the house to yourself." Her face lit up, but she tried to hide it. "Oh, that's great, honey. I'll probably just relax and catch up on some work." "Of course you will," I thought to myself. I didn't go anywhere. Instead, I parked my car 2 blocks away and set up shop at a friend's place. I used the hidden camera feed to watch the house. Sure enough, Tyler showed up the same evening with a bottle of wine and that smug grin I'd come to hate. They were so predictable, so stupidly confident, that I almost felt insulted. Almost. But this wasn't about catching them in the act. That part was already done. It was about setting the stage for what came next. The next morning, I called Tyler from an anonymous number. "I know what you've been doing," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. "Who is this?" he barked, panic already creeping into his tone. "Someone who knows you're screwing your best friend's wife and stealing his money. If you want to keep breathing, meet me at the docks tonight. Midnight. Come alone." I hung up before he could respond. Vanessa was next. I texted her from another burner phone, posing as someone from her gym. "We have a private session booked for 11 p.m. tonight. Your husband doesn't know. Be there or we'll talk." By midnight, they'd both walked into my trap. The docks were quiet, the air thick with the salty tang of the bay. I stood in the shadows of a shipping container, waiting. Tyler arrived first, pacing nervously under a flickering streetlight. His face was pale, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets as he scanned the empty lot. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Who's there?" I stayed silent, letting him stew. A few minutes later, Vanessa's car pulled up. She stepped out wearing the same "I'm too important for this" expression I'd seen her use on waiters and clerks when she didn't get her way. When she saw Tyler, her face twisted into confusion and then panic. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, walking toward him. "I don't know," Tyler snapped, throwing his hands in the air. "Someone called me, said they knew about us." Vanessa's eyes darted around the lot, searching for the unseen threat. "This isn't funny, Tyler. If this is one of your stupid jokes." "Quiet," I said, stepping out of the shadows. Both of them froze, their eyes widening in synchronized horror. "Ethan?" Vanessa stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't expect to see me?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with venom. "Don't worry, I'm not staying long. I just wanted to have a little chat." Tyler opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Don't. I'm not interested in your excuses." Vanessa tried to recover, her tone shifting to that fake sweetness I'd grown to hate. "Ethan, this isn't what it looks like. I can explain." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like. My wife and my best friend screwing behind my back, and stealing from me while they're at it. Am I missing anything?" Neither of them said a word, their silence confirming everything I already knew. "You thought you were so clever," I continued, pacing slowly. "Meeting in secret, hiding the money, thinking I wouldn't notice. But you underestimated me. I've been watching, Vanessa. I know everything." Vanessa's bravado crumbled, her face falling into a mask of desperation. "Please, Ethan, let's go home and talk about this. We can fix it." Tyler, on the other hand, stayed silent, his jaw tight as he looked anywhere but at me. "Fix it," I said, stepping closer to Vanessa. You didn't seem interested in fixing anything when you were screwing him in my office. Or when you were siphoning money out of my accounts. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. What do you want from us? Tyler finally asked, his voice shaky. I stopped pacing and turned to face him. What do I want? Justice. And a little fun. They didn't know it yet, but their nightmare was just beginning. Vanessa and Tyler stood there, frozen in place, the tension between us so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. I let the silence linger, savoring their discomfort. You've made my life a joke, I said finally, my voice low and measured. So I've decided it's only fair to return the favor. Vanessa took a cautious step toward me, her hands outstretched in a placating gesture.
Ethan, I'm sorry.
I was stupid, okay? But we can work through this. You love me, don't you? I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. Love you? That's a great question. Let me show you just how much I love you. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit play. The audio clip was clear. Vanessa's unmistakable voice, moaning Tyler's name during one of their trysts. Vanessa gasped, her face draining of color. Tyler's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists. What is this? Vanessa stammered. Oh, just a little something I saved for a rainy day, I said, smirking. But don't worry, it's not just audio. I got plenty of videos too. You two look great together, by the way. Really cinematic. You're insane. Tyler spat, taking a step toward me. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. This little device contains everything. The texts, the videos, the financial records. Everything. And as of 10 minutes ago, it's already been sent to a few key people. Vanessa's eyes widened in panic. What people? Who did you send it to? Let's see, I said, pretending to think. Your boss, my lawyer, a few friends in common, and Tyler's wife. You bastard. Tyler lunged toward me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Don't, I said calmly. If you touch me, I'll make sure this goes even more public. And trust me, Tyler, you don't want that. He stopped in his tracks, his chest heaving with anger. Vanessa looked at me, tears streaming down her face now. Ethan, please, she begged, her voice breaking. You don't have to do this. Think about everything we've been through together. Oh, I've thought about it, I said, my voice turning cold. I've thought about the years I wasted trusting you, loving you, and I've decided you don't deserve any more of my time. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, their world crumbling around them. But this was only the beginning. As Ethan walked away from the docks, his mind was a whirlwind of plans. The satisfaction of their shocked faces gave him a temporary sense of relief, but he knew this was only the start. His revenge would be more than just a public spectacle. It had to dismantle every aspect of their lives. The first step was professional. Ethan made sure the evidence against Tyler reached the management team at their firm. Tyler had always been seen as charming and dependable, but the emails and records Ethan provided painted a different picture. They exposed not just his affair with Vanessa but also his role in siphoning funds from Ethan's accounts. It didn't take long for the company to terminate Tyler. The scandal spread quickly through industry circles, leaving Tyler with no professional credibility. Next was Vanessa's turn. Ethan reached out to key figures in their social circle, ensuring they received a carefully curated selection of evidence. Within days, word of her betrayal had spread, turning her into a pariah. Invitations dried up, friends distanced themselves, and the polished image she had built crumbled. But Ethan didn't stop there. He hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Vanessa's financial dealings. What the investigator uncovered was worse than he expected. Vanessa had secretly accumulated debt in his name, using his trust as a shield while she funneled money into private accounts. Armed with this information, Ethan worked with his lawyer to freeze those accounts and launch a legal battle to recover what was stolen. Ethan also ensured that Vanessa's professional life took a hit. Her involvement in the embezzlement scheme was quietly shared with her employer. It wasn't long before her job disappeared, leaving her without a source of income and facing lawsuits from multiple angles. As Ethan moved each piece of his plan into place, he felt a grim satisfaction. He wasn't just punishing them for the betrayal. He was stripping them of the resources they had used to manipulate and exploit him. The life they had built together, the life they had destroyed, was now their ruin. This was no longer about justice. It was about annihilation. Ethan's plans unfolded with precision. Tyler and Vanessa, once so confident in their lies and deceit, now faced an unrelenting series of consequences. The social fallout was swift and brutal. Friends who had once admired their charm and sophistication turned cold, whispering behind their backs or outright cutting ties. Neither of them could show their faces without being met with judgment or disdain. Tyler's personal life disintegrated even faster than his career. His wife, upon receiving the evidence Ethan sent her, immediately filed for divorce. The court filings painted Tyler as a man who had not only betrayed his marriage but destroyed his reputation in the process. Left without a job and no one to turn to, he became a shadow of the arrogant man he once was. Vanessa fared no better. Her career was in shambles, and her mounting debts became unmanageable as Ethan methodically recovered the money she had stolen. What little she had left was seized in legal battles or lost in penalties. Her once glamorous lifestyle had evaporated, leaving her in a modest, empty apartment far from the life she had cultivated. As their lives unraveled, Ethan remained distant, refusing to engage with either of them directly. He kept himself busy by rebuilding his own life. He threw himself into his work, revamping his business and ensuring the damage Tyler and Vanessa had done was repaired. For Ethan, it was not just about rebuilding what they had destroyed but rising above it. He worked harder than ever, surrounding himself with people he trusted, people who shared his values. Slowly but surely, his life began to flourish again. Meanwhile, Tyler and Vanessa were left to stew in their isolation. Ethan knew that the silence from him was its own kind of torment. They had expected fury, confrontation, or even a chance at reconciliation. Instead, they were met with a cold indifference that made their downfall feel even more complete. For the first time, they faced the stark reality of their actions. The lives they had destroyed were now their own. As Ethan's life regained stability, he began planning his final move. It wasn't enough that Vanessa and Tyler faced professional ruin and personal isolation. He wanted to leave them with something they could never escape. It was time to deliver the final blow. Ethan took the evidence he had gathered, everything from the financial fraud to explicit details of their affair, and compiled it into an anonymous package. He ensured it was sent to the appropriate institutions. Tyler's attempts at embezzlement were forwarded to law enforcement, Vanessa's financial misdeeds to the IRS. The fallout was swift and merciless. Tyler faced a federal investigation for the money he helped funnel out of Ethan's business. The evidence was damning, leaving him with no room to maneuver or plea for leniency. Charges were filed, and Tyler's once glamorous future turned into a bleak fight for freedom. Vanessa, already drowning in debt, now faced audits and penalties that would follow her for years. With no financial safety net and no allies left, she had no choice but to sell what little she had left to stay afloat. Ethan's final twist was not just in their downfall but in how their paths would cross one last time. He ensured that their respective legal troubles would collide, tying them together as co-conspirators in the financial fraud. The fallout left them inextricably linked, unable to escape the wreckage of their shared betrayal. For Ethan, this was the most fitting revenge, leaving them bound together, no longer as lovers but as mutual destroyers. He watched from a distance as they scrambled to salvage what remained of their lives, knowing there was nothing left for them to save. Vanessa's life descended into chaos faster than she could have imagined. With her financial accounts frozen and mounting penalties from the IRS, she was left with nothing but despair. Every attempt to stabilize her situation was met with failure. No employer wanted to take a risk on someone with a history of fraud, and no friends remained to lend a hand. Her isolation deepened as the weight of her actions became impossible to ignore. The whispers of neighbors and former acquaintances were constant reminders of her fall from grace. The glamorous image she had once curated was now a cruel mockery of the person she had become. In her desperation, Vanessa tried to reach out to Ethan. She called from unknown numbers, sent emails begging for a meeting, and even showed up at his office. But Ethan had anticipated this and made it clear to his staff that she was not to be let in under any circumstances. Every email went unanswered, every call blocked. Vanessa's shame and desperation only intensified. Her betrayal of Ethan, once a thrilling escape from the monotony of their marriage, now felt like the biggest mistake of her life. She began to resent Tyler for dragging her into his schemes, for making promises he couldn't keep, and for leaving her to face the consequences of their actions alone. But Vanessa wasn't entirely without cunning. In a last-ditch effort to claw her way out of the abyss, she attempted to shift the blame onto Tyler. She claimed to have been manipulated, portraying herself as a victim in the fraud they had orchestrated. Her attempts to salvage her situation only deepened the animosity between her and Tyler, turning the once allies into bitter enemies. What they had built on lies and deceit was now crumbling under the weight of their mutual hatred. Ethan, from a distance, watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. Tyler's descent was equally catastrophic. The federal charges against him had turned his once charismatic persona into that of a desperate man fighting for survival. His professional reputation was irreparably tarnished, and his personal life was in shambles. His wife had left him, taking their children with her, and the few friends he had tried to lean on quickly abandoned him when the extent of his betrayal became public. The legal proceedings were relentless. Ethan's meticulous documentation left no room for doubt in the court's eyes. Tyler's involvement in the embezzlement scheme was laid bare, with Vanessa's attempts to shift the blame only adding fuel to the fire. Tyler, in turn, retaliated by exposing Vanessa's deeper role in the fraud, ensuring that neither of them could escape unscathed. With every accusation they hurled at each other, their fragile alliance crumbled further. Their shared secrets, once a source of power over Ethan, became weapons they used against one another. Tyler accused Vanessa of orchestrating the theft, claiming she was the mastermind behind the entire operation. Vanessa countered by revealing Tyler's reckless spending and attempts to siphon additional funds for himself. In the end, Tyler faced a harsh reality. His life as he knew it was over. The court stripped him of any remaining assets, leaving him with crippling legal fees and the possibility of prison time. His attempts to manipulate others had backfired spectacularly, leaving him exposed and alone. Ethan ensured Tyler's humiliation was complete. He made sure that Tyler's name was synonymous with fraud and betrayal in their professional circle, ensuring that any attempt to rebuild his career would be met with closed doors. Tyler, once the golden boy of their industry, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. Ethan felt no pity for him. This was the justice Tyler deserved. Vanessa and Tyler, now stripped of everything, faced the crushing reality of their isolation. What began as an illicit thrill between them had spiraled into complete devastation. With no allies left, they were forced to rely on one another out of necessity. Their once passionate affair became a toxic blame game. Every interaction was laced with bitterness, each accusing the other of being the cause of their downfall. Vanessa resented Tyler for his arrogance and his inability to protect her from the consequences of their actions. Tyler, in turn, seethed at Vanessa for dragging him deeper into the mess when he believed he could have escaped unscathed. As the legal battles continued, they found themselves tethered together, bound by the wreckage of their betrayal. The financial penalties, public humiliation, and looming legal sentences weighed heavily on them both. Vanessa attempted to seek sympathy from the few remaining people who hadn't completely turned their backs on her. She crafted a narrative in which she was a victim of circumstance, a woman led astray by the allure of Tyler's charm and promises. But no one was convinced. The evidence against her was too damning, her actions too deliberate. Tyler's attempts to rebuild his life were equally futile. With no job prospects and mounting debts, he retreated into a cycle of anger and self-pity. He tried to contact Ethan, desperate for a resolution or a way to negotiate his way out of the chaos, but his calls went unanswered. Ethan had no interest in offering either of them the closure they sought. Ethan, meanwhile, watched from afar. He had no plans to intervene further. Their suffering was the natural consequence of their choices, and he saw no reason to lift the weight they now carried. He had rebuilt his life and moved on, leaving them to face the full impact of their actions alone. Their isolation became the ultimate punishment. As weeks turned into months, the weight of their mutual hatred became unbearable for both Vanessa and Tyler. Their toxic partnership, once fueled by passion and deceit, had become a prison of endless arguments and blame. With no allies, no careers, and dwindling resources, their situation grew increasingly desperate. Vanessa, once the confident socialite, now barely left her apartment. Her once pristine appearance was replaced by a hollow, disheveled look that mirrored her inner turmoil. She avoided mirrors, unable to face the person she had become. The few times she did venture out, she faced whispers and stares, reminders that her shame had become public knowledge. Tyler, on the other hand, had turned to alcohol to numb the pain. His days blurred together in a haze of cheap whiskey and regret. He spent hours replaying their downfall in his mind, convincing himself that Vanessa had been the real instigator. In his mind, she had manipulated him, and he had simply been an unwitting participant. The breaking point came one night when they found themselves face-to-face once again, this time during a legal meeting about their pending fraud charges. Their lawyers had urged them to cooperate to minimize their sentences, but the meeting quickly descended into chaos. Vanessa accused Tyler of ruining her life, of dragging her down when she could have salvaged some semblance of respectability. Tyler, fueled by months of pent-up anger, retaliated with venomous accusations of his own, blaming her for his ruined career, broken marriage, and impending legal punishment. Their shouting match ended with Vanessa storming out of the room, tears streaming down her face. Tyler, left behind, sank into his chair, his anger giving way to a profound sense of emptiness. For the first time, the enormity of what they had done and lost truly hit him. Neither of them realized it yet, but their paths were now diverging. The bond that once held them together had been irreparably shattered, leaving them to face their punishment alone. The legal system, cold and unyielding, finally caught up with Vanessa and Tyler. Their actions, meticulously documented by Ethan, left no room for plausible deniability. Both were found guilty of fraud and embezzlement, their sentences reflecting the severity of their crimes. Vanessa's punishment was harsh but not unexpected. Her assets were seized to repay the debts she had incurred, and the court sentenced her to several years of probation along with mandatory community service. The lifestyle she once flaunted was now an impossible dream, replaced by grueling days in an orange vest cleaning public spaces. The humiliation of her punishment was unbearable. She endured the disdain of passers-by who recognized her, whispering about the woman who had thrown her life away for greed and lust. Each day served as a reminder of how far she had fallen. Tyler faced even graver consequences. His deeper involvement in the financial fraud, coupled with the evidence Ethan had strategically provided, resulted in a prison sentence. Stripped of his freedom, he found himself in an environment where his charisma and manipulation held no power. In prison, Tyler's descent into despair was swift. The man who once thrived on control and confidence was now a shadow of himself, navigating the brutal realities of incarceration. His attempts to maintain a sense of superiority were quickly crushed by the unforgiving hierarchy within the prison walls. Meanwhile, Ethan observed from a distance. He never attended the court hearings or spoke publicly about the situation. His silence was a calculated decision, allowing Vanessa and Tyler's downfall to speak for itself. For Ethan, justice had been served. His revenge wasn't just about their suffering, it was about restoring balance. He had ensured that every ounce of pain they inflicted on him was returned tenfold, leaving them with nothing but the consequences of their choices. With Vanessa and Tyler's punishment finalized, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. For months, his life had revolved around unraveling their betrayal and dismantling the foundation of their lies. Now, with his revenge complete, a strange emptiness began to creep in. Ethan knew he couldn't let their actions define him any longer. It was time to rebuild, not just his business but his sense of self. He expanded his company, focusing on new ventures and partnerships that thrived under his leadership. The wounds Tyler had left in the business were healing, replaced by growth and success. On a personal level, Ethan reconnected with friends and family he had distanced himself from during the chaos. He was met with support and understanding, reminders that he wasn't alone in his journey. He even began attending therapy, working through the lingering anger and betrayal to ensure he wouldn't carry the weight of Vanessa and Tyler's actions forever. Despite his progress, there were moments when the memories resurfaced, sharp and painful. The sight of a familiar restaurant, a random song on the radio, or an empty space in his home would bring back flashes of what he had lost. But Ethan faced these moments with a quiet resilience, refusing to let them pull him back into the darkness. Over time, he began to rediscover joy in small things. A hike through the woods, a quiet evening with a good book, the simple satisfaction of a job well done. Slowly, he started to envision a future untainted by their betrayal. Ethan's life wasn't perfect, but it was his again. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Tyler were forced to confront the reality of their actions without the chance for redemption. They existed in their separate worlds, bound by the knowledge that they had been the architects of their own destruction. Ethan's decision to move forward, while difficult, became his ultimate act of revenge, thriving despite the damage they had tried to inflict. Years later, Ethan's life was unrecognizable from the one he had shared with Vanessa. His business had grown into a thriving enterprise, and he had cultivated relationships built on trust and mutual respect. He no longer flinched at memories of the betrayal. Instead, he viewed them as lessons, painful but necessary for his growth. Vanessa had faded into obscurity, her life defined by the choices that had led to her downfall. She lived alone, working menial jobs to make ends meet, the vibrant persona she once wielded reduced to a bitter shell of regret. The few who still spoke to her described her as haunted, forever tethered to the mistakes she had made. Tyler remained in prison, serving out the last years of his sentence. His attempts to maintain relevance within their old social circles were futile, as even those who once admired him had moved on. His reputation was irreparably damaged, his future bleak. Ethan never reached out to either of them, nor did he respond to their occasional desperate attempts to contact him. He left the past in the past, content with the life he had built. One evening, sitting on his balcony overlooking the city, Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the revenge, and the years of rebuilding had transformed him. He wasn't the same man who had naively trusted Vanessa and Tyler. He was stronger, wiser, and more at peace with himself. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the crisp night air fill his lungs. He had won, not just in the sense of justice, but in reclaiming his happiness and his life. Revenge had been satisfying, but the true victory lay in his ability to move forward. As the city lights twinkled below, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He had conquered the storm, and in its wake he had found freedom.